Did you ever wake up one morning and just want to take apart an Ansco Autoset? Well, not many people do. So, but if you do, we're going to do that right here. This is actually the Minolta Hymatic equivalent. Mechanically, they're identical, but this is the actual Ansco Autoset. I've got two of these that I got working, and the only remarkable thing about these cameras is that it was one of these that John Glenn bought at a drugstore for $40 and had NASA modify to take with him for the Friendship 7 mission. That was before my time, but there you have it. Well, mechanically, this and the Minolta, they're actually made by Minolta. They're identical. Selenium. They have an auto function. They have a bulb function, and they have manual aperture settings. I don't know what the default shutter speed is in the cameras I've got that work. It's not very fast. That seems maybe 100th of a second, 100 and a quarter. And in full auto, that was manual, it seems somewhat slower. Now, it's my understanding that was a little inconsistent. Well, these cameras are old, so you'll get what you get. The point is, when they were new, you had an automatic setting and you had a manual setting, all based on the selenium meter. The selenium meters in two of these work. They appear to work fairly well. I haven't film tested them yet. This one, on the other hand, is sluggish and slow. It's a busted camera. That's why I'm going to demonstrate on this one. So frequently the deal with these is, at least in my experience, is that the shutter blades get gummed up, they get slow, they get stuck. I bought these on eBay for the very few dollars. All of them said either untested or shutter's stuck, shutter doesn't work, whatever. And these have a really cool setup for almost like a modular construction in their lens setup. So with a little less talk and a little more action, we're going to go forward here. So you've been to a tag sale, you bought one on eBay, pay very little for them, and the shutter is defective for whatever reason. So to get that shutter out, it's going to be less than what it looks like. You have to do a couple things first. Around this ring, this is the first ring, you got to find two teeny little grub screws and back them out as far as you dare. And there's one over here. This is a 1/16. That's what it says anyhow. A 1/16 flat screwdriver that is actually broken. So half of the tip is missing. So I'm using, well, if this is the 16th, although it looks bigger than that to me, this is a 32nd. Tiny is the bottom line. So you crank those grub screws out. Try not to take them out all of the way because they are teeny. And then what you are going to need to do is fiddle around a little bit to get this trim ring to come out, these grub screws set into a groove in this ring. That's better. Oop, of course. So get the ring started. Try not to really force it. Turn this screw out another turn. There. Trim ring is out. I'm going to turn those screws back in because I don't want them to drop out. Because if you drop them on the floor, I predict you'll never see them again. There's your trim ring. Now, if you just need to take the lens itself off, you grab your next screwdriver. This one is a 3/32 flat, and you'll see, I hope you can see, that there are 4 open holes around the circumference of this channel in here where that was hidden by the ring. You stick your screwdriver down in there, feel around, and you will find the slot in a screw. The screw will probably not come out of the hole. I know you don't need to see all of this fooling around. I figured I would just do it in real time. Oh wait, my mistake. There should be 4 screws. This one has 3 because I lost one. This is a parts model. So you've unscrewed the 4 screws in these open holes behind the trim ring, and then what you can do, the whole assembly comes out. It is a single piece. There's nothing that drops, there's nothing that falls. This exposes what is actually your focus ring, and you can see there's another problem you might find, because the weird lubricant that was used in these things 40, 65 years ago, after all these years, can sometimes turn into something else that is not slippery, glue almost, and you might need to be able to get to those threads. In this case, I'm not going to take that apart. If you needed to get this thing apart, there's 4 screws here. That takes out this inner ring. And then there's a series of screws around another ring underneath this that allows this, the actual knurled ring that you turn with your hand, to either slide around the brass what would you call it? The external ring, threaded ring that creates that in and out motion. And if you took all of those screws out, a bunch of parts would drop out, but you'd be able to take this ring off also. I have never done that, and I don't ever intend to. I have taken this inner ring here off to make adjustments to the brass threaded ring relative to the aluminum threaded housing. I got one camera that clearly had been taken apart and messed with before, and the adjustment was somebody had taken it apart so much that they had changed the actual focus, but that's a different story. So 4 screws. Took this out. There should be a lens screwed into the back here, like that. I've already taken that out because, as I said, this is a parts. Took the back lens off, and what I did, you know what, let's just go through the whole process. You may not need to do this, but if you did, you'll see 3 nuts, and they really are a nut. They go over, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a nut with that takes a flat screwdriver to install them over a stud. When you get the thing open, you will see. There's one. I imagine you would have needed a special tool, because a flat screwdriver will only take you down so far before that center stud will prevent you from continuing to screw it in. So there's the 3 nuts. I'm going to set those aside in my egg carton. That takes off this inner ring that goes behind the trim ring. And then if you needed to, this one is already pre-loosened. But what I had done is I took a broken hacksaw blade. There's marks. You can do it with the lens, not the lens, but the ring tool, if you want to. But it was just as fast and easy to do this. So you break that loose, and then you can unscrew the whole lens. Comes out complete, and then under here, or under that, are the studs that those nuts go on, and those are pretty cool too. You'll have to kind of figure it out. These should not be terribly tight. And in fact, I was able to use a pick and turn them gently until they came out. Now I'm sure you can't really see that. It's got a threaded top, that's where the nut goes. The base is threaded, that's where you screw it down into the lens housing. It has a shoulder which limits the amount of depth. It limits how far down it can go. It stops right on that shoulder, giving enough space for this next ring to move, or not. It doesn't move, but it allows everything underneath it to move without binding. So using the pick, again, unscrewing it gently. Set all this stuff aside. And one more, which is also loose. If you have a very fine pair of needle nose, you can grab this outer circumference and just tweak them. You don't want to crank them in, and you don't want to grab them so hard that you mar them up when you're taking them out. To reinstall, I'm going to show you that now because I don't plan on going back to the process completely of reassembly. To put them back in, I found this is a spray tube off of a spray can of something I had. I don't remember what. But the inside diameter happens to be just a little bit smaller than the threaded end. The up side threaded end. So you put that thing on, shoulder out, get this thing oriented properly, turn it in until it grabs, and then wiggle that thing off, and then you've set that thing back in its place, shoulder down, so that you can continue your assembly. I only use that trick just to get them started threaded, and then I turn them in with the pick, and just barely tight. So those are out. I'm gonna reach in there. I'm gonna take this ring out. I don't know what that's called. Really only goes in one way. This is the ring that controls and adjusts aperture. And this really only goes on one way too. It's got, you see this fork here. Well, that fits over this tab here, which is what, oops, there that last screw is. So that tab controls your aperture size. And then, so you put that on there first. You need to get a couple of pins in there properly. There's one here, and there's one there. Now this thing, it doesn't work. It's not functioning properly, so I can't really show you much more than that. But that's how you can get it down to this point without having things spring apart on you. There are some very fine hair springs on the back you want to watch out for. There's one here, and there's one here. If you wanted to check it out, this right here is your shutter release pin. Give it a little bump up. Take a tool, go inside this fork here, and gently give it a crank until it sets, and then you can release it. Well, it worked pretty good that time. But that's how you can set this thing off. And we can change our aperture if we wanted to. And if this thing were working correctly, it would have made adjustments to whether or not it was on auto, bulb, or manual with this ring, which is actually two parts. You have an outer ring, you have an inner ring. If you're putting this back together, the inner ring or the outer ring goes back on first. Alright, I'll stop what I'm doing and show. You will see on this fork there will be a corresponding slot cut into the outer ring that will fit into. It also has a relief cut here that allows this to fit in. So it can really only go one way, which is kind of nice. So, and then you could take what I did. Where is it? I took my eyedropper, I took my 99% alcohol and I flooded not so much this, but these blades. Took off the lenses, so it's just the shutters, and worked it. And worked the aperture. I hope you can see that. Anyway, I worked all those functions, used my little canned air to blow out and dry out the alcohol. The propellant in the compressed air will make this thing really cold. So if you blew all and dried all the alcohol, blew it all out, it would probably stick, just because of the effects of the cold. You would actually need to let this sit around and regain room temperature to check it to see if it was going to work properly or not. My experience is most of the time, if you can clean those up with some alcohol or lighter fluid, a lot of online people say you can probably get a working camera. Now, the reassembly part, I'm only going to go a little ways because most of it's academic. You will figure it out. It's not that complicated. There is kind of a trick to getting this back onto here and everything be lined up. Alright, so here we are, getting ready to put our camera back together. I've reinstalled improperly the film advance. I've taken the bottom off. So put this thing up. Now, this is how I did it. It may or may not be the right way. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's going to faint at the very thought that I did it this way. But this is what worked for me, and it got my camera back together. First thing I had to do was I had to set the advance. Now this camera doesn't work, so I have to cheat a little bit. You should not have to do that. So I've cranked up the film advance. I'm going to wind up the mechanism. So I've given the film release lever thingamajig a little bump up, because if it's down, it's in the release position and it won't work. Very gently give that a crank. The shutter is set. Right here is what controls the relationship between the light meter and, I guess, this is the next issue. You've got this gear here. It's one that has a brass pin through it. It can, in this when it's cocked, it can only turn in one direction. I'll go ahead and release it. You see it spun around that way. We'll cock it again, and hopefully you can see it turn. So when it releases, it can only turn, as you're looking at it, it can only turn clockwise. And that pin is at a slight angle from the lens opening. So I know that gear can only turn clockwise when it's released. Now that, in turn, being backwards, translates to counterclockwise. So I take my flat screwdriver very gently and I turn to the corresponding slip fit something or other in there. I turn it all the way counterclockwise and then back just enough to put it roughly in the same angle relative to the lens hole as the pin in this shaft. Then I've got to line up this slot with a corresponding, I don't know what that's called, it's whatever, it looks like the end of a screwdriver, and it has to go into this slot like that, and that controls the shutter speed. So shutter's cocked, everything should be more or less lined up. My angles don't look exactly right. I'll turn this one a little bit more. Oh, I'm sorry, did that backwards. It's got to be that way. So I'll take that, and inside there, if you press the shutter release, you'll see the fork, and you'll also trip the mechanism. There's a fork in there. You want that pin to go in the center of the fork. So I know you can't see this, but we're going to put this thing in like that. And if everything is lined up, okay, so I'm going to have to do a little reassembly here, because there's enough problems with this camera. I just can't do it the way I was going to do it. So I put the inner ring back on and see where it's matched up with that fork. It's supposed to have a detent ball in here that makes it click into place. You can do it any way you want to. My opinion is they're more trouble than they're worth, and they make the mechanism work hard. So it doesn't have one. So I did just like I showed you. I put the thing in there. It took a little wiggly jiggly to get it to settle down in there, and a couple of tries that I didn't include in the video. But I crank it up. You shouldn't have to do that. And the shutter works. Once cocked, you should be able to move. You know what, I don't have this thing screwed down either. Alright, so I'm going to put a couple of screws in here just to make it so it'll stop moving around. I'm going into more detail than I actually had intended to, so I apologize for all the herky-jerky, out of order, not making sense stuff. Alright, now it'll hold still. If you're not super careful and super dexterous, you can wind up with a bunch of junk. So what I wanted to show you was just how to remove that from the body of the camera without it having to be a journey. So I hope that was useful. I'm not going to put this camera back together because it's a piece of crap. I hope that was useful. If somebody out there has one of these, it's not a huge undertaking. you don't have to take off, because when I did it, I took off these little screws and the strip ring that goes around there. There's a couple of them. I took those off. I took all these little pieces out. I wound up giving myself a lot more work than was actually necessary. So that was the whole point. I like this camera. I look forward to trying it out. It works the way it should. And it might even have a good selenium cell in it. So I hope that was helpful. I'm sorry if I apologize if it was confusing, but this one is straightforward enough. You will figure it out. So there you have it. Till next time.